Hello, I'm Anita McVeigh, and this is the Iran War Today, our daily briefing, which will bring you up to date with all you need to know on day 84 of the US-Israel war with Iran. Let's start with some of today's key developments. America's top diplomat says there's been some progress in negotiations with Iran as Pakistani mediators are in Tehran for talks.
We're not there yet. I hope we get there. The president would prefer to do a good deal. But is you asked me if I'm optimistic. I don't characterize it as optimistic or pessimistic.
The Strait of Hormuz continues to be a big sticking point. Iran claims 35 ships passed through it with their help in the last 24 hours. Western leaders have again hit out at the continuing blockade.
It is disgraceful that Iran is still trying to hijack the whole global economy by preventing international shipping getting moving through the strait.
Israeli airstrikes continue in Lebanon. The health ministry again accuses Israel's military of deliberately targeting paramedics. The IDF says it's hitting Hezbollah targets. And pilgrims begin to arrive in Mecca in Saudi Arabia for the annual Hajj. Will the war have an impact on the world's biggest religious gathering? Well, let's start with diplomacy and what America's top diplomat has called a little bit of movement. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Washington is waiting to hear the outcome of talks between Iran and Pakistan in Tehran. You'll remember Pakistan has been a key mediator in all the previous discussions between the US and Iran. The Pakistani Interior Minister met the Iranian Foreign Minister in Tehran today, their second meeting in 2 days. The Fars news agency reported it was to discuss proposals to resolve differences between Iran and the United States. Well, speaking in Sweden after a meeting of foreign ministers from the NATO military alliance, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio had this to say on those discussions with Iran.
There's been some progress. I wouldn't exaggerate it. I wouldn't diminish it. There's more work to be done, but look, yeah, there's been some, and that's a good sign. I'm glad they said that. We're not there yet. I hope we get there. The president would prefer to do a good deal. You asked me if I'm optimistic. I don't characterize it as optimistic or pessimistic. We're going to respond based on the facts as we see them and as they emerge. So what the president has outlined as his priorities are clear. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. The issue of highly enriched uranium has to be discussed. Its disposition has to be dealt with. And of course, the issue of future enrichment has to be dealt with as well. Those are the core pillars of any sort of agreement, in addition to opening the straits, of course. So I think there's been some progress, but we're not there yet. And hopefully that'll change. It may not. Honestly, it may not. We're dealing with a very difficult group of people. And if it doesn't change, then the president's been clear. He has other options. He prefers the negotiated option and having a good deal, but he himself has expressed concern that maybe that's not possible. But we're going to keep trying. I know our guys are still working on that very hard.
Meanwhile, a Pakistani security source has confirmed to the BBC that the chief of the country's army, Field Marshal Asim Munir, has also travelled to Iran to help mediate. Marco Rubio says Pakistan is a key partner in the discussions.
Well, the primary interlocutor on this has been Pakistan, and it continues to be, and they've done I think an admirable job, and that's what we continue to work through. Obviously, other countries, have interests because, especially Gulf countries that are, in the middle of all this, may have their own situation going on. We talk to all of them, but I would just say that the primary country we've been working with on all of this is Pakistan, and that remains the case. And it's my understanding he was supposed to go yesterday, but it could be as early as today that Field Marshal Munir could be traveling there very, very soon. And we're in constant communication with him at the highest levels of our government, are constantly talking to him.
Well, a senior official from the United Arab Emirates has said the US and Iran have a 50-50 chance of reaching an agreement. Presidential advisor Anwar Gargash, speaking at the Global Security Forum, said that Iranian officials had a tendency to overestimate their cards.
50-50 chance that we will reach an agreement. My worry is that the Iranians have always, let's say, over-negotiated. This is not something new. that they have missed a lot of chances over the years because there is, I think, a tendency to overestimate their cards, so to speak. I hope they don't do that this time because the region does need a political solution.
And joining me here in the studio is BBC Persian special correspondent Khazra Naji. Khazra, good to see you. That little bit of movement that Marco Rubio is talking about, where might that be coming from? On what aspect of the talks?
We don't know. And that is the case, has been the case for some time. Mr. Gargash, who's the advisor to the UAE king, has just been talking about 50% of the chance of a deal, and Iran habitually overplaying its hands. It's correct, actually. Iran has a tendency to take the hardest line possible in these negotiations, and it has been missing chances over the years over nuclear issues and other issues. And I'm not holding my breath that there's going to be something out of this talks happening in Tehran right now, although there are signs that things are moving forward. Asim Munir, the chief of the Pakistani army, is there. A delegation from Qatar is there too. So they are pushing. They're pushing for Iran to come forward and put forward some reasonable positions, particularly on Hormuz.
Yeah, if there was any chance of compromise from Tehran, on what? Where might that come from?
First and foremost, the Strait of Hormuz is the most immediate problem. Okay, the nuclear deal is a big deal, and President Trump is after getting a deal on that with Iran. But immediately, the most immediate issue is the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. And don't forget that Iran only a few days ago demarcated the area in the Strait of Hormuz. It's an area that ships need Iran's permission to get through. Iran says, we are managing this area. And that area on the map shows that Iran is on collision course, both with Oman and the UAE. Because
their territorial waters.
Territorial waters, it involves them. So things are getting pretty hairy, and the fact that there's some 1,600 ships are waiting to get out of the Persian Gulf, and you know the world economy is holding its breath. So that's the main thing. If there's going to be any big issue, it has to be the Strait of Hormuz first and foremost.
So that is the biggest sticking point right now.
There are issues too. The nuclear issue, for example, hasn't been sorted, and Iran wants it discussed later on during a period of 30 days sort of negotiations. Maybe they will agree to something there. But at the moment, there don't seem to be any move forward on that issue either.
Okay, Khazra, thank you very much. Khazra Naji from BBC Persian. And let's get the view now from the United States with our White House reporter, Bernd de Busman, who's in Washington. Bernd, good to see you as well. So let's pick up with that question about Marco Rubio talking about slight progress, and the question that I put to Khazra. Do you have any sense where that slight progress might be coming from?
We don't, and the White House has been very, very quiet about the details of these discussions over the past several weeks, really. I think it's fair to say, though, that there's much less of a sense of urgency here in Washington than there was even at the beginning of the week, when it seemed that strikes could be imminent. Of course, still issues remain, the Strait of Hormuz being foremost among them. Marco Rubio said that a tolling system wouldn't be acceptable, and he kind of suggested, which is something that's not been suggested very often before, that it could have a domino effect on other regions in the world in which we might see tolling systems, and that no country in the world should accept that. At the same time, the threat of military force is very much on the table, and Marco Rubio left clear that option B, as the White House has been calling it, still exists if they were to decide to resume combat operations if these talks fall through.
Now, Republicans in the House, Bernd, called off a vote on an Iran war powers, which would have affected President Trump's ability to call the shots, if you like, on the war with Iran. Tell us more about that, because the Democrats have been accusing Republicans in the House of cowardice.
Well, this legislation, which was introduced by Democrats, would have essentially forced Trump to withdraw from the conflict in general. Republicans had struggled to find the numbers necessary to dismiss it. And once it became clear that they couldn't find those numbers, they decided to delay the vote entirely, meaning we won't see it until at least June. Democrats responded by characterizing it as Republicans playing games with politics at a time of crisis. Here's what Democratic Representative Gregory Meeks had to say about it.
Members of the House should stand and do their responsibility. We had to vote. We've been doing it. This is the third or fourth time that we've put it forward. It's not going anywhere. They can run, but they can't hide. And the American people's voices are going to be heard loudly and clear about their dismay of this war of choice that Donald Trump has put America in.
And of course, Bern, still a lot of U.S. forces deployed in the Middle East, especially around the Strait of Hormuz. Just remind us of what assets the U.S. has there at the moment.
Very much so. The Pentagon has repeatedly made clear that all the assets in place, including aircraft, naval vessels that would be necessary to resume major combat operations, are very much still in the region, and in some cases have been reinforced. The naval vessels in particular have been extremely busy. They've been enforcing the blockade on Iranian ports. In the last update we had from Central Command, which oversees military operations in the Middle East, they said that to date 97 vessels have been turned around and 4 have been disabled at sea during the enforcement of this blockade. So the forces are very much still there, and that does give President Trump military options should he choose to return to combat operations. And those military options could take different forms and be of different sizes, ranging from kind of limited strikes to a resume of the countrywide strikes we saw during Operation Epic Fury.
OK, Bern, thank you very much. Bern de Busman in Washington. Now, as we've already heard, the Iranian blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and demand for tolls to allow ships to travel through is a sticking point in discussions. The UK's Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper has joined the criticism of Iran. Take a listen to what she had to say.
It is disgraceful that Iran is still trying to hijack the whole global economy by preventing international shipping moving through the strait. So that's why the UK and France have together been leading a coalition of countries, both to maintain pressure on freedom of navigation, because no country should be able to restrict international shipping in that way. It's also why we've been drawing together a maritime mission for when the conflict is over, and why we're also supporting the negotiations that the US has underway with Iran and supported by mediators at the moment, because we need to get that Strait of Hormuz open. That is impacting on the whole world and on fertilizers as well as fuel prices as well.
While the naval arm of Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed today that 35 ships had passed through the Strait of Hormuz in the past 24 hours with permission from Iran. State media said the ships included oil tankers, container vessels and other commercial vessels. Independent tracking still shows traffic running at a fraction of normal levels. Well, Tehran's newly formed Persian Gulf Strait Authority also published a map on X outlining a controlled maritime zone which ships cannot enter without approval from Iranian authorities. Crucially, that newly claimed zone stretches across the strait and includes the territorial waters of both Oman and the United Arab Emirates. Michelle Wiese-Bockman is a senior maritime intelligence analyst at Windward. She told us right now the situation in the strait is very complicated.
The toll arrangements are really not clear yet. And also there are a lot of carve-outs for countries that have been able to make their own separate agreements with Iran, such as China, Pakistan, India. I think Japan also seems to have been able to negotiate transits, and also vessels that are coming in and out to serve Iran don't appear to have to pay the toll. And also the fundamental principles of the freedom of navigation, which underpins globalization and seaborne trade, are at risk here if control is consolidated and this toll is allowed to be applied.
Let's turn now to Lebanon, and officials there have again accused the Israeli military of deliberately targeting paramedics as Israeli airstrikes continue. The Lebanese Health Ministry said Israel was defying international resolutions and showing contempt for international humanitarian law. It said 2 paramedics and a child were among 6 people killed in an Israeli airstrike on a village near Tyre on Friday. The ministry said 4 other paramedics had been killed in an overnight Israeli raid in the nearby town of Hanawiya. Israel says it is targeting the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah. Our Middle East correspondent Lina Sinjab is in the Lebanese capital Beirut and sent us this update.
A video circulating online showing an attack in the south of Lebanon. People were rushing, calling for help, and the minute the ambulance arrived, another attack. This is a continuous situation that the government here in Lebanon is accusing Israel of deliberately attacking paramedics. At least 6 paramedics were killed between yesterday overnight and today. The total number of paramedics killed since the 2nd of March exceeded 100. Israel says that they are targeting Hezbollah facilities and that Hezbollah is using ambulances to transfer people. The government is denying these accusations and saying that attacking paramedics is against international law. This is continuing to happen in various locations in the south of Lebanon. Although the ceasefire has been extended for another 45 days, but Israeli attacks in the south are continuing. Despite talks that took place also in the U.S., supported by the U.S., there is no sign of Israelis stopping these attacks on civilians and paramedics. The Hezbollah also are saying that they are firing rockets and continuing attacks against Israel in a retaliation for the continuous Israeli violations for the ceasefire. The situation in the south is far from any ceasefire. It's a war zone. On a daily basis, there are attacks on villages. There's demolishing of villages and towns and homes. Thousands of people are still displaced. Evacuation orders are also continuing. And there are over 1 million who were forced to flee their towns and villages are still scattered across the country. Here in Beirut, the government set up a new area for them with tents so that they can stay in, providing hygiene facilities as well. Which is a sign that they have no trust and confidence that these people are able to go back to their homes anytime soon. The government is still determined to continue with negotiations, to continue to find a political solution to this war, but there is a lot of skepticism about Israel's intention and willingness to end this war.
Reports have suggested one reason President Trump called off new military strikes on Iran was over concerns from Saudi officials about the annual Islamic pilgrimage known as Hajj. Pilgrims have begun to gather in Mecca in Saudi Arabia for the largest religious gathering in the world. But this year it comes during the conflict in the region. With more, here's Greg Holyoke from BBC Monitoring's Middle East and North Africa team.
Hajj is the largest annual gathering on earth. Every year, millions of Muslims from across the globe make their way to Islam's holiest site, the Kaaba, in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. But this key Islamic rite has also become politicized. We've seen recent regional reporting suggesting that Gulf leaders, especially from Saudi Arabia, have been encouraging President Donald Trump to hold off on possible during the Hajj season, citing an atmosphere of Hajj across the Muslim world. The Gulf is a key hub for long-haul flights, but the recent Iran war led to a huge reduction in air traffic. Thousands of flights were cancelled, with severe economic impacts on Gulf countries. And for Saudi Arabia specifically, the current calm has one specific economic advantage. The Saudi economy benefits by up to $12 billion every year from religious tourism. After oil, it's the biggest source of income the country has. And much of that comes during this intense, short period. That's not to say that Saudi Arabia hasn't used access to these sites for political reasons before. For almost a decade, hopeful Iranian pilgrims were denied access to Saudi Arabia until a landmark 2023 deal brokered by China, restored diplomatic relations. But during the Iran war, we saw Iranian strikes directly hit Saudi soil. Despite this, from Iranian media reporting that we've seen, even in the past few days, citizens are still making their way to the holy site for the Hajj. In fact, on some social media in the region, there's been speculation that it was pressure for the pilgrimage that brought about a ceasefire in the first place.
Whether you are joining us on YouTube, TikTok, Sounds, radio or TV, thanks for your time. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the Iran War Today.